It started like any normal night. Hannah Graham, an 18-year-old college student, went out with friends in Charlottesville. She had dinner, a few drinks, and then sent a message saying she wasn't feeling well. A little later, she walked off alone. That was the last time anyone saw her. Security cameras picked up her trail through the city and showed a man walking up beside her. What happened next would spark a massive search and uncover a much darker story than anyone expected. Who was this man? And what did he do after the cameras stopped recording? Hannah Elizabeth Graham was born on February 25, 1996, in Reading, England, the cherished daughter of John and Sue Graham. When the family later relocated to the United States, they settled in Charlottesville, Virginia, a peaceful, community-focused town that would shape much of Hannah's life. From a young age, Hannah radiated warmth and intelligence. Her curiosity was boundless, and her love for nature, books, and meaningful conversation made her stand out. Friends and family were drawn to her infectious smile and genuine kindness. She was the type of person who could effortlessly connect with anyone. In school, Hannah was a standout student with a passion for science and music. She was equally at home on the softball field as she was on the stage, participating in both athletics and the arts. Her ability to balance rigorous academics with creative pursuits inspired many of her peers. After high school, Hannah enrolled at the University of Virginia, where she chose to study anthropology and global studies, disciplines that reflected her deep interest in cultural understanding and human connection. University life allowed her to expand her worldview and grow into a confident, socially active young woman. Her sense of humor, charm, and lively spirit made her beloved across campus. On September 12, 2014, a typical Friday night in Charlottesville, Hannah left her apartment with plans to enjoy the evening with friends. Dressed casually in a black crop top, jeans, and white sneakers, she headed out with her usual energy and excitement. Like many students, she planned to meet friends at a pre-party before heading downtown. As the night unfolded, Hannah kept in touch through texts, sharing her location and plans. She visited a local cocktail lounge and eventually parted ways with her group around midnight. Her intention was to return to her apartment alone, something she had done many times before. But something was different this time. Surveillance footage later revealed Hannah walking aimlessly, her movements increasingly unsteady. She was seen texting rapidly and, at one point, messaged a friend that she was lost and didn't know how to get back. Though downtown Charlottesville is well lit and bustling, Hannah appeared disoriented and confused. Investigators would later consider whether she had consumed alcohol or was otherwise impaired. Throughout the next hour, she was spotted speaking to multiple people, seemingly seeking help, but not explicitly asking for it. Witnesses recalled that she looked distressed, but not panicked. Then, Hannah crossed paths with a man named Jesse Leroy Matthew Jr. He offered to accompany her, and she accepted. Jesse, 32, was known in the community for his work as a hospital orderly and a youth football coach. At a glance, he seemed like a regular member of the community. But behind the facade was a troubling history. Jesse had previously faced accusations of sexual misconduct, yet had never been convicted, allowing him to continue living among the public without scrutiny. Physically, he was imposing, tall, broad-shouldered, and easily recognizable by his dreadlocks. His approach that night, however, appeared calm and non-threatening. Jesse Matthews' seemingly approachable appearance, paired with a smooth and calculated demeanor, allowed him to gain Hannah Graham's trust at a moment when she appeared vulnerable and disoriented. Security footage later captured the two walking through Charlottesville's downtown mall, an area normally filled with laughter, conversation, and nightlife. But that night, the tone was different. Around 12:45 a.m., surveillance cameras documented Jesse approaching Hannah. He appeared to initiate a conversation. Witnesses described Hannah as confused and possibly intoxicated, wandering the streets as though she were trying to get her bearings. Jesse, recognizing her disoriented state, offered to help. Some reports suggest he told her he'd walk her home to ensure she got there safely. Though she didn't know him, the urgency of her situation and his calm tone may have made her believe he was someone she could trust. Security footage later recorded them walking together toward Garrett Street. Their interaction seemed strained. Hannah didn't look at ease. Investigators believe Jesse used both manipulation and persuasion to keep her close. At one point, a witness noted Jesse placing his arm around Hannah, a gesture that appeared possessive rather than protective. Subtle but chilling, this was the moment when a stranger's control began to replace Hannah's autonomy. Behind Jesse Leroy, Matthew Jr.'s friendly facade was a history that few knew in full. Born on September 13, 1982, in Richmond, Virginia, he was raised in a working-class African-American family. Though not marred by violence, his early life was shaped by economic hardship and quiet emotional strain. His upbringing, while outwardly unremarkable, masked underlying struggles that were often ignored or misunderstood. As a child, Jesse lived in a modest household with parents who tried to provide stability. No documented abuse surfaced from his early years, but the pressures of financial instability shaped the environment around him. Despite these conditions, Jesse's childhood didn't raise red flags. There were no glaring incidents to suggest what would come years later. In adolescence, Jesse's behavior began to shift. While he participated in sports, an outlet that gave him access to peer relationships, he never excelled academically or socially. Former classmates described him as withdrawn, difficult to read, and somewhat unpredictable. But there were no formal warnings, no interventions, no accusations that stuck. It was in these formative years that subtle signs of deeper issues may have emerged, though they went unnoticed. His conduct wasn't overtly violent, but the absence of clear boundaries or accountability created a space where darkness could grow undetected. Those who knew him back then said he was quiet, but no one imagined he could be dangerous. The day after Hannah's night out, September 13, 2014, her absence began to raise alarm. She hadn't returned home. Her phone was silent. Friends initially assumed she might have stayed out late or overslept, but as the morning stretched into afternoon, the worry deepened. By midday, one friend, growing increasingly anxious, reached out to Hannah's mother, Sue, who also tried calling her daughter, to no avail. As hours passed with no word, a decision had to be made. At 5:30 p.m. that day, just over 24 hours since Hannah had last been seen, a missing person report was filed with the Charlottesville Police Department. What began as concern among friends now escalated to a full-scale alert. The tone of the situation shifted immediately. Police launched a preliminary investigation, initiating searches and interviews. At first, with no signs of foul play and no clear evidence of where she might be, authorities labeled Hannah's disappearance as involuntary but non-criminal. There were no immediate clues, no physical evidence, no messages from Hannah, no distress signals. But the growing sense of urgency suggested something far more sinister was at play. Unbeknownst to many, the hours following her last known location would soon lead investigators into the darkest corners of the city and of Jesse Matthews' past. As hours turned to days and there was still no trace of Hannah Graham, those closest to her grew increasingly alarmed. Friends, once hopeful she might simply be unreachable or resting somewhere safe, now feared the worst. The intensity of concern around her disappearance escalated with every hour. When Charlottesville police formally took on the case, one of their first major steps was to review surveillance footage from around the downtown mall, where Hannah had last been seen. What they discovered shifted the tone of the investigation entirely. Hannah wasn't just lost, she might be in danger. From the beginning, Hannah's parents, John and Sue Graham, were central figures in the search. Sue flew in from England to be on the ground in Charlottesville, determined to do everything in her power to bring her daughter home. She and John refused to let Hannah's story fade or be treated as just another missing person case. Their visible presence in the media and close cooperation with authorities kept the investigation in the public eye. As investigators combed through hours of footage, a critical piece of evidence emerged. Cameras had recorded Hannah walking toward a poorly lit part of the city, accompanied by a man matching a specific description: tall, dark-skinned, and broad-shouldered. Though the images were grainy, the figure stood out enough for law enforcement to identify him as someone of interest. A meticulous review of witnesses and nearby activity led police to focus on one name: Jesse Leroy Matthew Jr. Matthew was not an unknown figure to law enforcement. While he had no previous convictions for violent crimes, his record was far from clean. Years earlier, he had been accused of sexual assault while attending Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia. No conviction followed, and he moved on with little consequence. His past quietly filed away and largely ignored. But now, in the wake of Hannah's disappearance, that past demanded closer scrutiny. On September 19, 2014, just 1 week after Hannah was last seen, Jesse Matthew was officially identified as the prime suspect. Authorities obtained a warrant for his arrest. But by then, Matthew had already fled Charlottesville. His disappearance set off a nationwide manhunt. His face and name were broadcast across media outlets and social platforms. The FBI joined the search, deepening the scope and urgency of the investigation. Matthew's sudden flight was seen as a sign that more sinister truths were about to emerge. As detectives dug into his background, a pattern began to form, one darker and more disturbing than they had anticipated. Beyond the incident at Liberty University, whispers and reports surfaced of previous suspicious behavior. There were allegations, closed investigations, and unreported incidents, all seemingly unrelated at the time, now forming a haunting trail of red flags. Even more unsettling was what investigators uncovered next. 5 years before Hannah's disappearance, another young woman named Morgan Harrington vanished after attending a Metallica concert in Charlottesville. Morgan was 20 years old when she went missing in 2009, her case lingering cold and unresolved. At the time, no viable suspects had emerged, and leads had dried up. But now, with Matthew's name in focus, detectives revisited the file, and what they found would change everything. Forensic testing had preserved DNA from Morgan's case. When compared with Jesse Matthews' genetic profile, the results were undeniable. It was a match. The connection between the two women, both college students, both vanished from the same city, both linked to the same man, was devastating. The mystery of one case had begun to unravel another. On September 24, 2014, after days on the run, Jesse Matthew was located and arrested at a campsite in Galveston, Texas. He had tried to evade capture by crossing multiple state lines, but cooperative efforts between federal and local authorities finally led to his arrest. The news hit hard in Charlottesville. For Hannah's family, friends, and the wider university community, the arrest offered a glimmer of closure, but also confirmed their deepest fear that Hannah's story would not end in a safe return. On October 1, 2014, Jesse Matthew was formally charged with abduction and first-degree murder in connection with Hannah Graham's disappearance. He was extradited back to Virginia, where he would face not only the charges related to Hannah, but also those tied to Morgan Harrington. The realization that Matthew had likely evaded justice for years sparked outrage across the nation. His case became a flashpoint in discussions about missed warnings, institutional failures, and how predators can slip through the cracks of the justice system again and again. The arrest of Jesse Matthew Jr. marked a turning point, not just in the investigation into Hannah Graham's disappearance, but in the city of Charlottesville itself. What began as a missing person case had now cracked open a deeper, more terrifying reality. The man in custody may have been linked to more than one unsolved crime. As prosecutors prepared their case, evidence began to pile up. Not only had Matthew been connected to Hannah through security footage and DNA, but forensic analysis linked him to the 2009 disappearance and murder of another young woman, Morgan Harrington. The courtroom would eventually become the place where these disturbing threads came together, and the full magnitude of Jesse Matthews' actions came to light. In Charlottesville, the impact was seismic. A city known for its safety, its sense of community, and the vibrancy brought by thousands of students suddenly felt changed forever. The fear that something like this could happen in such a familiar, trusted place sent shockwaves through the University of Virginia and beyond. Friends, classmates, professors, and total strangers came together in a shared sense of grief and disbelief. Candlelight vigils lit up the campus. Posters bearing Hannah's face covered walls and bulletin boards. The community didn't just mourn, they rallied. For weeks, volunteers joined search efforts, following the smallest leads and combing through miles of land. Everyone hoped for a miracle, but what they found brought heartbreak instead. On October 18, 2014, just over a month after Hannah disappeared, search teams discovered a body in a secluded wooded area of Albemarle County, roughly 10 miles from where Hannah was last seen. The discovery came after days of coordinated searching using geospatial analysis and cadaver dogs. The location was remote, private land with thick underbrush and no signs of recent activity. Law enforcement immediately secured the scene. What followed was a painstaking forensic process to confirm the identity of the remains. Initially, there was no immediate confirmation, but the evidence soon became undeniable. Articles of clothing matched what Hannah had been wearing the night she vanished, and then DNA testing removed all doubt. The body belonged to Hannah Graham. For her family, the confirmation was a moment of unimaginable pain. The hope that she might still be alive was gone. But so was the agonizing uncertainty that had haunted every day since her disappearance. They finally had answers. Answers no family ever wants. In the wake of this tragic discovery, Jesse Matthew was formally charged with first-degree murder, abduction, and related offenses in the case of Hannah Graham. The trial proceedings would stretch on for months, marked by emotional testimony, forensic evidence, and chilling details. Hannah's parents sat through every moment, determined to see justice carried through to the end. The prosecution built a powerful case. They presented security footage, witness accounts, and most crucially, physical evidence that tied Matthew directly to Hannah. DNA, fibers, and timelines all aligned. And as the trial unfolded, the prosecution also introduced evidence from the case of Morgan Harrington, arguing that Matthew's crimes followed a clear, escalating pattern of predatory behavior. But in February 2016, before the trial could reach a dramatic courtroom conclusion, Jesse Matthew made a decision that changed everything. He entered a guilty plea to the abduction and murder of both Hannah Graham and Morgan Harrington. The plea deal spared the families a prolonged trial, and it ensured Matthew would never walk free again. He was sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. Though the sentence delivered justice, it could never undo the pain. Still, for Hannah's family, and for Morgan's, it was a step toward closure. It was also a stark reminder of how close Matthew had come to escaping accountability altogether. If not for the unrelenting efforts of law enforcement and the heartbreakingly brave perseverance of grieving families, he may never have been brought to justice at all. The case also sparked broader questions about institutional accountability. Matthew had been accused of sexual misconduct at 2 different universities, Liberty University and Christopher Newport University. Yet he had managed to slip through the cracks without lasting consequences. His pattern of predatory behavior had been evident for years, but the system failed to act decisively. Hannah's story became a rallying cry for change. Her parents, Sue and John Graham, used their platform to push for greater awareness of campus safety, more rigorous background checks, and better communication between institutions when allegations of misconduct surface. They refused to let their daughter's story end in silence. The story of Hannah Graham is one of tragedy, resilience, and justice hard fought, but it also raises deeper questions about trust, about how predators slip through the cracks, and about how we protect one another. Now we want to hear from you. Do you think enough has changed since then to prevent similar tragedies? Let us know in the comments below. And if you believe stories like Hannah's need to be remembered and shared, please like this video and subscribe for more real stories that matter. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.